Welcome to my dungeon.
Welcome to Kuldrin's Krypt. I'm your host, Master Kuldrin. If you're new to the show, we use our combined 30 years of experience to dispel myths, get rid of stereotypes, and answer your questions about BDSM. You can call in at 865-268-4005 to leave your questions or visit the Krypt at kuldrinscrypt.com. On this episode of the Krypt, we're getting into the second half of our consent episode, with our main focus being on boundaries. But first, I've got to say hello to my beautiful and amazing co-host, Funsize. Hello, Funsize.
Hello, Master Kuldrin.
How's it going today?
Today's all right. We both had a really rough week this past week, but we are bouncing back as we do.
As we must. Like you said, it's been a little frustrating, a little aggravating, but coming back to record on a Sunday for me has certainly become like coming home, making that connection with you on Skype and talking about things that we love and we're passionate about. It certainly has a way to soothe the savage beast. As I always do, let me hit these rules to love by, and then we're just going to jump right into talking about consent and boundaries. And at this point, I'd like to say to all the Krypters out there or new listeners that if you missed the previous episode, go ahead, stop now, jump back to consent part 1, because we are going to build on that a little bit and touch base back from there. So don't want you to miss anything. So with that said, rules to love by. Rule number 1, safe, sane, consensual, and informed. Rule number 2, kinky. From the Kinky app, available on all platforms, that stands for knowledge, no intolerance, kindness, and integrity. And the quote from Mr. Paul Young, submission is not about authority and it's not about obedience. It is all about relationships of love and respect. And I think we're really going to get into that, especially the respect part in talking about boundaries. So where are we going to start here?
Let's start with where we left off from part 1. We were talking about the importance of being able to say no and uphold our boundaries when it comes to consent. You did a wonderful job with the basis of these show notes for us, because you used to teach a class on boundaries and you offered up the notes you had from that, and I basically just filled them out in a BDSM sense for our show notes today. So recognizing that, I'm going to give the definition that you gave. A boundary is defined as a dynamic line separating an individual's internal environment and external environment. While varying in permeability and flexibility, this also applies to a line between others in that environment. Very well said, Master Kuldrin.
Why, thank you. I wish I could take 100% credit for it, but I must be honest that there are a few words in there that I've had to look up in the past, so I wasn't born with this illustrious vocabulary or Southern accent. I've had to earn and learn both. But enough of stroking my own ego.
Yes.
The purpose of boundaries. Obviously, it is to keep us safe, but I think this is where the definition is going to carry out a little bit further. So, for the purpose and types of boundaries, purposes to facilitate a separation and individualization and to assist the individual's adaptation to the environment. So, we can't completely just meld into our environment without losing ourselves. And most people don't want to be, and it's certainly not healthy to be everything that you are around. To become part of a community is a good thing, but maintaining your individual identity really is what this first purpose and type is about. For BDSM, Funsize, how would you relate that more specifically to it?
For BDSM, it means that you're going to use these personal boundaries to maintain your personal self and what you're willing to consent to. It could be something like you're in a household and you have a sister or a brother there who is a fellow submissive, and they're willing to do something that for you is a hard limit. Well, you have to use your own boundary to say, this is my hard limit, and it's okay that they are willing to do this, but I am not, and vice versa.
So that kind of sounds like, well, just because your friends go jump off a bridge, does that mean that you're going to go jump off a bridge too? If you have
Hey, what do you know? It's the same thing.
Yeah, if you have appropriate boundaries, well, then you're not going to go jump off a bridge because that's not what you're into. Unless it is, and then by all means, as long as it's safe, sane, and consensual, have fun, right?
Exactly.
Some more on types. Really, they can be broken down into, I would say, 3 main parts. We've got our rigid open boundaries, which can be considered your soft limits. Rigid closed boundaries. These are similar to your hard limits. And then flexible, or things that you might be open to and things that you're willing to negotiate. And that's just about as clear as it can get. Do you have anything really to add to that?
I don't. Like I said, you gave me a really good skeleton to work with as far as these show notes go.
Why, thank you. It was one of my more fun classes to teach when I was working in the psych field. There again, enough stroking my own ego. So where are we going next? What are we learning? I guess it would be a conversation about what we need to learn about our own boundary systems as far as what is appropriate and what is not.
Yes, you need to learn what the appropriate boundaries for you are, how to set them, and how to recognize and respect the boundaries of others. And it really goes into a conversation about how to identify your own boundaries, first off. Become aware of your needs. You can't expect others to respect or know what your boundaries are if you don't know them yourself. For example, if you know that you need to drink 4 glasses of water a day, that's something you've learned about yourself. Probably the hard way if you're like me and have ever become dehydrated before, then you can have a conversation with the person that you're with, whether it's a play partner, a dominant, a submissive, and say, hey, I need this. This is an actual need for me. Let's find a way to uphold this.
You know, another thing that kind of reminds me of back several episodes. In fact, it may have been before you and I met when I was talking about my friend that I've known since I was a child who had been in the lifestyle for about 4 years and knew that I was a very kinky person, but didn't come out to me for quite a while. And her telling me about her bedtime, because that is something that she knows that she needs, but she cannot seem to manage it on her own. She fights sleep like a child, which is appropriate since she's a little. And that is something that is always negotiated anytime she is in a DS relationship, is that is a boundary that is set up that she be in bed at a certain time and that there be specific punishments carried out that are negotiated. Some of which she comes to the table with more than willing to suffer the consequences, and others that she's talked about in the past that, certainly wasn't her idea and she didn't like it, but she knew that those consequences would certainly push her to be mindful of her own boundaries that she needed to have imposed on her. Which comes to the next point is getting support. Having others who are going to be there to support you, to help you uphold these boundaries, is such an important step. A lot of us like to think that, especially from the dominant side, we like to think that, well, we're a dommy-dom, we're a toppy-top, we don't need all this help and support because we can do it on our own. And that's generally how people are when they're new. And unfortunately, that's how some are when they're not so new. But many times you can find a protector, a brother, a sister in the lifestyle, a mentor, somebody that can be there to help you in this capacity, to help. Because really, I think in talking about this particular section of it, we're talking about our own personal growth, not just our health, but growing and adapting into what we have in our mind's eye as a better person. Any specific points that you'd like to touch on there?
It is a myth that dominants have to be on top of everything and have to be in control and basically do it alone as far as the support system goes, even with their own boundaries. As people know, I am a switch. My husband is a dominant, but he's not my dominant, except for in one small matter, which you ironically brought up. When I get sick, when I get tired, sometimes I just need a nap, and I turn into complete and utter brat at those times. And that's when my husband does top me and puts my cute little butt to bed without any arguments or questions, because he does take control in those points. But with other things, I'm also the head of our household. in every other way. So it's a very unusual support dynamic, but it's one that we both need. So you don't have to be in control all the time if you're going to be head of household or the top or the dominant. It's okay to get help from others, even if it's something small.
Yeah, and to me, it's really not a control issue, though it may appear to be to a lot of people. And you and I have actually talked about this before in the past, both on and off the mic, but whereas it's not control, for me, it is intelligence and education and wanting to be the best that you can be. I have turned to many a submissive, both mine and others, and asked them about certain situations because I don't have their perspective and I don't have their life experience. So if you open yourself up to it, you can certainly learn from other people's failures and successes. So I think that that is one of those unfortunate self-imposed boundaries that a lot of us in and outside of the lifestyle tend to place on ourselves, is that we can't go to others for help, support, information, especially if they have a standing considered lower than ours. All right. So the next one to get into, communicating effectively. Now, I know that you are a communicator, so let's hear your take on this.
Whether it's expressing an interest or negotiating your limits, this has always been an important skill. Absolute must-have for both of us.
In your boundary system, a lot of people find it very difficult when they are going back to the point that we were just talking about, getting support, having that effective communication and not such a rigid boundary system that we can't communicate our needs, whether it be for education, for playtime, whatever the case is. Communication is certainly a must because despite what many people think, nobody can read minds. And I think it's pretty simple when it comes to that.
Yes. I mean, reading minds would be a wonderful thing, but...
a wonderfully scary thing. So,
I don't know. Sometimes there's certain situations where it is a skill I'd love to have mastered. I'm sure I'm not the only one that feels that way.
Right.
Which moves us on to our next point.
Well,
be realistic.
Yes. And that is often one of the scariest things. People often want to say that perception is reality.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just absolutely not true. Reality is reality. Now, how we perceive it is going to adjust things in our mind and how we react to situations, things of this nature. But to be able to step back, have the maturity to first accept the consequences of doing this, whether it be that you're right, because sometimes we just don't want to be right, or to admit that we're wrong and see things for what they truly are and being realistic. Because perception is not reality.
No.
There are a lot of people I know that perceive themselves to be wolves, kittens, otters, and though it is the reality that this is a persona that they relate to, that it makes them feel comfortable in that role play, they're still human, and that is the actual reality. But I know people that, and I know that you've met people that have been so deep into this type of pet play or animal play that they get to a point where they kind of break away from a lot of their human aspects and almost live it. I know somebody down in Atlanta that lives at 24/7, has quit their job, filed bankruptcy, got rid of all their debt that way, except for their student loans, because you can't, anyway. But it's very unhealthy. So, yeah, making sure that you maintain a realism when it comes to this. You have to do it to have effective boundaries.
Yes.
Let's hit a quick review on these 4 or 5 steps here. So how to identify your own boundaries. Become aware of your needs, get support, communicate effectively, and be realistic. So moving on, where do boundaries start?
Well, boundaries are very natural for all of us. Infants start to develop boundaries at 6 months old, and usually boundaries are set and developed before age 3. If you look at an infant in the eyes and it stared back briefly just before closing its eyes or turning its head, that's because it's experiencing too much stimulation and it's setting its own personal boundary of, this is how long I can look and take the stimulation right now, and then it'll turn its head when it can no longer do that. But the same can be said with someone who is a natural submissive. The people that will naturally hide their face with their hair, look down, have their chin slightly tilted down. They are setting the personal boundary that they are not necessarily okay with trying to look someone who is a dominant or a top, as far as their perspective goes, in the eye, which is also a very interesting thing to witness in the lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people will have that as a rule, as a house rule, that you don't look me in the eye.
As I recall, that's one of yours.
Especially in a high protocol setting.
Yes.
Yeah, but I've been doing a lot of soul searching and thinking about that. And as of late, I've kind of come to the realization that maybe I'm not so much into the high protocol or at the highest level as I used to be. And now it pretty much comes down to play, or when there is definitely a firm collar on moment. Even if it's 24/7, there's going to be those at ease times and everything is fine there. Look at me, talk to me as you wish, as far as eye contact goes, maintaining respect, of course, as I will do with the submissive. But when it comes to playtime, unless I tell you, that is certainly a time where they're not allowed to look me in the eyes.
From my perspective, I have never minded having a submissive look me in the eye, but I will say that they will always be the first to look away.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I will tell you, I will share a secret as to why I do that.
Okay.
And it's because, as you are well aware, and any of the Krypters that have talked to me are well aware, outside of a scene, I am kind of, for lack of a better phrase, I'm pretty goofy. I'm pretty laid back. I like to joke around. I like to cut up with people, not in a mean way or a bullying way, just telling stupid little dad jokes, as my wife calls them, and things like that. And when I get into a scene, I look very evil. My entire body image will change because the sadist is unleashed. And even my eye expressions, like some people tell me that they just don't want to. But then after the first time that I will force them to look me in the eye during a scene, afterwards in a check-in, it never fails. They always tell me, when I glanced at you and you called me on it, when my eyes met yours, I saw your harshest, some say evil side or cruelest side. But then when you told me to look you in the eyes, I saw that at first, but then I quickly saw the care and the compassion and respect, trust, and love in your eyes. And in a scene, I know that. I know what I truly am on the inside, and I don't want that to come out to them. All I want them to see, until I want them to see it, is the sadist. And then there will come a point in nearly every scene that I participate in where I feel it's important. Maybe they're getting pushed to the edge, or they're wanting me to break them. And I feel that it's very detrimental to maintain that trust and care and concern within themselves, that they see the compassion that is beyond that persona that is there. So when people go to my FetLife page or the website, KuldrinScript.com, and they see the picture of me wearing the bloody spiked mask and that look in my eyes there, that's a really good example of that. At first glance, people are like, oh my God, I love that picture. It's so evil. Really? Have you taken a good hard look at it? Because look deeper, stare into my eyes in that picture, and you will see what is truly there. And it can actually be hard for me to admit sometimes, because I do really enjoy that persona, but it is just that, to be honest and to be open with everyone listening. It is a persona that I carry. It's just a piece of me, but only maybe a 40% piece. The rest of it is the care and compassion. And that is a boundary that I have learned within myself to maintain, is that doesn't change. I don't allow myself to totally become that persona.
I have been told that my eye color will change depending on the role I've taken. Usually it's hazel, a mixture of a golden brown and olive green. As apparently as I get more submissive, my eyes turn greener. And when I go full on dominant sadist, intense wonder that I apparently am, my eyes will go from a whiskey colored brown into an almost red sheen. And it's apparently intense and frightening to some submissives that I've had in the past. So interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting notes.
The joys of having hazel eyes, because
Indeed.
I've been told virtually the same thing about mine. It's not an uncommon thing. It sounds funny, but it's just the way that the chemistry works, because it's a totally different chemistry makeup in being submissive as it is to being dominant, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's jump back into the primary bullet points that we're touching on here. So healthy boundaries. People with healthy boundaries have limits. They recognize what they are. They know what they will or will not do, and they know what they will or will not allow others to do. Very simple.
Yep.
Very simple. It's one of those things that can be easier said than done if we believe that, if we make ourselves believe that. So I feel this can be a very deep dive that we're about to take in discussing where we start with boundaries. So the first one was boundaries are natural. This one is defining what healthy boundaries are, and now getting into teaching others how to treat you. That is the most amazing thing that can be one of the hardest things that people can do, because in most cases, we're not teaching others how to treat us. We are reteaching them how to treat us if we have lived with improper or unhealthy boundaries. So go ahead.
Training is a big part of this. Not only do you have general training, but with each new relationship, you have to train yourself and your partner as to how to be treated and how to treat them. Note that I completely agree with what Master Kuldrin just said. You have to teach yourself and your partner. You have to train yourself and your partner as to what your healthy boundaries are. And yeah, that's very difficult. I think we could both admit that in our personal relationship, I had a moment where my personal boundaries became an issue because I had not taught you them, and I had forgotten them myself. And it caused a bit of a stir between us, which we have thankfully bounced back from.
Yes.
For the better, I think.
Absolutely. Anytime you can go through conflict and come out on the other side of it, not hating each other, then there has more than likely been personal growth there.
Yes, we faced that conflict, and while it did change the relationship, it has also made it stronger. I think as far as boundaries go, we respect each other a lot more. We understand each other a lot more, and it's made us closer.
Yes, I agree. And on top of that, I have to tell you that just 2 days ago, someone messaged me and asked me if we were in a DS relationship.
Well, that is a sticky answer.
It was, are you and Funsize currently in a DS relationship? Apparently, even from my local community who knows me very well and listen, shout out to you guys. Love you all very much. There was some question about it. And the answer is no, we're not.
Yeah, to clarify, we were under consideration of each other. Mistakes were made on both sides. Communication, long distance, things of that nature just got in the way. So we're not under consideration anymore. And yes, it is kind of painful, but at the same time, I know I have Master Kuldrin's support and friendship as he has mine always.
Absolutely. So. And like you said, I think that we're a lot closer now in our friendship than we were before for being able to go through that hardship and see it through to the other side and not give up on maintaining both a personal and a professional relationship. But because there was some questions about that, I did feel that this would be an appropriate place and way to address it, and I kind of sprung that on you.
You did, but you did it in the right way and the right timing.
Well, good. I'm glad that you feel that way. If not, I would have cut it out of the show, but we'll leave it in and continue on here in
communicating our boundaries.
Yes, and communicating our boundaries.
It's important to listen and respect the communications of others as well. And remember that not all communications of boundaries is vocal. A person may be demonstrating a personal boundary via silent cues. So it's important to always be observant of your surroundings and of silent communication.
Yep, and that's a very large part of communication, if you go back to that episode, is body language. The vast majority. And I was just in a conversation with someone about this yesterday about texting. In fact, it was Percusio, and she prefers to text. She relates it to numbers. She's an engineer, a rocket scientist. To be more specific, she's literally a rocket scientist. So for that engineer brain being just straight to the point, specific, and I'm like, yes, but that leaves no room for inflection or body language, these things. So things can often become misinterpreted. And she's like, yeah, it happens. I take the consequences when that takes place and things are corrected. And I'm just like, okay, whatever. Like, no, I would much rather talk on a phone. Do not text me for a long drawn out conversation. Just call me. I reserve texting for pretty much yes or no in most cases, unless for some reason I am busy or in hiding, which will happen from time to time because everybody just needs a break. And that's one of the personal boundaries that I have found more difficult for me to maintain than anything else, because if someone takes the time to message me or call me, I really tend to feel bad for not responding or not answering, which I'll always respond and explain the situation, but they're wanting to chat. And typically I love to chat with people, but there are times when I just have to take a personal day. And I think that's very important for everyone, but it's something that's really, really hard for me to do. In fact, early on in my relationship with my wife, she kind of helped put that in place because she recognized that I had a need for it. She is the master of taking personal time. Like, I don't think there's anybody better than her. She can completely block out the world and not care a bit, which sounds cold and cruel, but it's not, because that's really the way it should be. It's like the airplane scenario. In case of cabin pressure loss, put your mask on and then help your loved ones or your neighbors with theirs. So we have to take care of ourselves first so that we can take care of others later. All right, I kind of jumped off topic a little bit there, but moving back in, what do? We've defined it. We've kind of dove into it, given some personal examples. But one of the big questions, and this is where this conversation about boundaries ties into consent. So here's the linking point between it being episode 1 and episode 2 of consent. When boundaries aren't respected, what are we going to do? And quite simply, we are going to be faced at that point within the BDSM community of a consent violation. And where do we go from there? So Funsize, if your consent has been violated, last episode we dove into some details of consent violation. I don't think that we need to readdress that. So let's kind of keep it a little lighter and just in general, if your consent has been violated, what do you do?
The first thing you want to do is determine for yourself if it was done as an honest mistake or a case of abuse. And from there, you're going to recognize that you are not to blame in either case. Seek support from those around you. Communicate your feelings. Take your time. The simple fact is, if you have been abused, it will take time to heal physically, mentally, and emotionally. And the only person who can say whether it has been enough time or not is going to be you. Rushing can often do more harm than good in these instances.
Yes. But also on that, though, being too afraid to get back up on the horse can also create in a person the response of post-traumatic stress disorder. So there is a balance there, a fine line that you have to
determine for yourself. Yes.
And which I know that we're going to touch on this, but having a consult with other people can help you in that determination. What can you do if someone you know has had their consent violated?
You can give them time. You can listen if they need to talk, but never ask or demand that they talk about what has happened. Honestly, that can be really traumatic when you have a bunch of people going, what happened? What are the details? From personal experience, it's unpleasant and it makes every part of you lock up and tense, and you don't want to communicate, because communicating makes it realer than you are necessarily ready to face. It makes it more difficult to get over and to heal in your own time that way. So definitely give the person time.
Absolutely.
Believe what they're saying. We each individually set our own personal boundaries, and we're the only ones capable of saying whether or not those boundaries have been crossed. So if a person comes to you and they say, my boundary was violated, this so-and-so person said this to me or touched me in this way or did this to me, even if that's not a boundary for you, it doesn't matter. It's a boundary for them. So you need to respect that and be supportive.
Yeah.
Try to put yourself in their shoes of how you would feel if your boundaries were violated and how bad it would be for you. So really practice empathy in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Very well said. And here is another confession. It's been within the past month that I violated someone's consent. It was with a toy that was a hard limit for them. We did not talk about it before the scene. Everyone knows I play with a lot of people, and I thought that it was someone else that toy, it was a whip, was a hard limit for them, and I was incredibly wrong. It was not someone else. And before she was able to throw a hand signal up to stop the scene, I had already struck her 3 times with it. And like yourself, in this case, there had been previous trauma with the use of that particular toy. And I had to take complete responsibility for it, of course. Here, we don't hold back. We don't hide things. We don't pretend that BDSM is just all rainbows and butterflies. We're honest and we tell the truth. So there are ups and downs, and I had to take complete responsibility for it. Luckily, she knows that it was not intentional. She has played with me again since, but I just did something that I really, really don't do. And that was entered into a scene with somebody without having a quick recap of hand signals, safe words, and hard limits to things that are, in certain scenes, only certain things are available to happen, especially if it's in a public play space or something of that nature. So we're not going to take a deep dive into each and every hard limit, but when you know what's in someone's toy bag or what is in your own toy bag, saying, okay, this is what I've got, are any of these a no? And she just, she knows me, she trusts me, and she didn't think about it because we'd played before. And unfortunately, I was just confused about that particular issue. And thank goodness there is no detrimental harm from it. And I never cracked it really hard. Actually, I never cracked it at all. It was just some very light, where more of the wind coming off from it puts the owie in it than anything else. But yeah, still feel bad over that. And it's my fault. I have to take responsibility for it. Some people that want to skirt responsibility would say, well, she should have reminded you. That is her responsibility to claim if she chooses to, which she has. However, it is my responsibility to own up to my part of it. And that's all that you should do in that moment, is take responsibility for your part, and don't say, yeah, I did this, but she should have done this. No. That's not taking responsibility. Anytime you say the word but, that's a negator. So everything before it no longer matters. But that's a hard one to talk about. It's so incredibly new, and I was so concerned that I'd completely devastated her from her response to it. But thankfully, we're okay. She's okay. And it's, and she knows, again, that there was no personal intent to cause harm emotionally or physically. And like you said, when we first got into this section, intent. Was it intentional or not? Is a big part of it too, is a big part of the healing process if your boundaries have been violated.
Thank you for sharing that.
It wasn't easy, but you're welcome.
I know. I think this episode and the one we've done on consent just before this, part 1, have probably been 2 of the hardest episodes for either of us to do.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you're having this experience or not. And I've got a lot of podcasting friends, both in our specific area of conversation and in, some meta podcasts, which are podcasts about podcasting. So it spans everything. And one of the things that I'm really noticing, the longer that we go, the more people think that we're perfect. And I have people argue with me that, well, you are perfect because even though you make a mistake, you're willing to admit your mistakes. And I'm like, yes, but nobody is perfect. I have a lot of flaws and I'm willing to admit them. But I am far from perfect. And I fear being put on a pedestal, which some people will listen to this and be like, well, that's just crazy. You're just some guy with a mic. And other people are like, oh my God, it's Kuldrin and Funsize. And
please don't ever do that to me.
And kind of, which I'm flattered by any time, no matter what the tone of somebody, even when I'm getting trolled, it's like, yeah, well, I may be getting trolled, but hey, at least I've got something out there that is worth trolling. So, but yeah, it's, being placed on a pedestal, is actually a boundary of mine, because if, say, Funsize, you put me on a pedestal, and this is all hypothetical, but if you did, you hold me in much higher regard than I deserve because I'm human. And then all of a sudden I do something to get knocked off or to fall off or to jump off face first off of said pedestal. I'm going to land on you, basically, because you're the one that's going to be hurt the most by it, because you're going to be crushed by the realization that I am not that person that you thought I was. So being placed there is a boundary of mine, because I don't want to see people get hurt when they realize, oh my God, yeah, he is just a guy with a mic and a lot of experience, and that he wants to share and teach. But God, he is flawed. Yes, I am.
Well, in being communicative and aiming for clarity and honesty in all things, back when we were under consideration for each other, I did have you on one, which I didn't realize I was doing, and didn't realize it was a boundary for you. So I'm very sorry for that. But I did have you on one, and it did emotionally crush me when you came down.
Yeah. And I hate that, but it's going to happen every time. And
yes.
The bad thing about it is it's not intentional. It just happens. You find somebody that has the same values that you have. And just because we have those values, as I just said, I committed a consent violation less than a month ago. It was unintentional, but it still freaking happened. I'm not perfect. And I can sit and talk about this all day long and the most perfect terms possible for a DS or MS relationship. But living it, they say those that can't do teach. Well, in this case, that's not true, but it is certainly easier to teach because you're dealing with another person, an entire dynamic that you are sharing with someone else. And anytime there is someone else involved, that doubles the potential for disaster. You've got not only yourself, who is going to need a break sometimes or exhibit some kind of flaw that you either did or didn't know was there, but regardless, it's a flaw. just so many different things that can take place. And make no mistake, DS, MS, vanilla relationships, they're hard. And nobody has it perfect. My wife and I, 16 years together, we've had 3 major arguments. The only time that we've ever yelled at each other, 3 times in 16 years. Every other disagreement, we sit down, we talk about it as adults. But there are still those 3 times that we acted like idiots and we yelled at each other. So, and people look at that, our friends are like, you guys have the most amazing relationship. It's so perfect. I was like, yes, it is amazing. It really is. It's the healthiest thing that I've ever been a part of, but it's not perfect. It's not perfect. We have little things that we do that gets on each other's nerves that we talk about from time to time. If we forget and it comes back up, it's like, and I'm not off topic here. I'm still talking about boundaries because these are things that I don't like and that she will do, or she doesn't like that I will do. And so we have to have that conversation. And that's a big part of it too, is maintaining a conversation, not shutting down about it or becoming overly emotional about it. But for more information about how to communicate on this, go to kuldrinscrypt.com/episodes. You will see an entire list of each episode by title only, not episode number. You can just click on that. There is one about communication and find out more information. And that one was also taken from a class that I taught while working in the psych field. Okay, so with all of that side note and tangent addressed, let's go ahead with our outline here. I believe we've got one more bullet point to touch on, and then we're going to get into a really, really hard question that I've kind of addressed already, but go into much, much deeper detail about it. So what's our last one here?
The last one, when you have someone in your life that has had their consent violated, is to not rush to be their saviors. This is especially difficult if you are a white knight or just anyone that's very protective, as I am. I even have had Bratty Red tell me that I get a little overprotective sometimes.
She's not wrong.
She's not. She knows me very well. She's going to be my future wife someday, so it's good she knows this about me. But often we can find ourselves wanting to be the saviors for those around us, especially if we have taken a role as protector. But we also need to remember that protecting someone is something that person has to consent to. Going off to fight a battle for someone who does not consent to it can be just as harmful to that person as the original consent violation was. And on that note, I am not offering consent on this, Master Kuldrin. I am simply throwing it out there to make the point, which is quite unfortunate and quite jarring for me this last week. I was informed this last week that the person who abused me, who violated my consent rather violently, has moved back to my community. And it was jarring and painful, but again, I don't need to be rescued. I still have a restraining order in effect. So
that's disturbing, but at the same time, it may be something that you find will precipitate growth and further healing that maybe you didn't know that you needed to heal from. You never know.
Perhaps I'm going with the avoidance, keeping with the restraining order tactic.
Oh, absolutely.
In this case.
I
don't need a face-to-face with them again.
No, I wasn't suggesting that. I'm just saying that it has been my experience that when I've had trouble with someone who has been removed from the area or left willingly, and then years later they've come back, it's kind of scratched that scar a little bit, caused a little bit more bleeding that needed to take place. And then when it healed back, the scar was even less than it was before. And I know you and your strong determination and self-awareness that I have no worries. I have no worries whatsoever. Because there would be no point. You certainly, as you said, you certainly don't need a white knight in this case.
Nope.
All right. So as I teased moments ago, getting into the hardest question of all. What do you do if you have been the one who violated someone's consent? And I just shared with you my own recent experience with this. So I've talked enough for a few minutes. go ahead and give us the breakdown, if you would, please.
The breakdown goes as follows. First off, be honest with yourself as to whether or not you intended the violation. If it is a case in which you made an honest mistake, then you should apologize sincerely, as Mr. Kuldrin, I'm sure, did. Offer understanding. That understanding comes in many different forms, and you will need to understand that your actions have affected someone who placed some level of trust in you, and that you may need to make further amends. Often you will have to make a greater effort to regain that person's trust using patience and communication every step of the way. And finally, you can forgive yourself for that mistake so that you can hopefully learn from it in the future. And I'm actually going to insert a personal story. So I've shared before that I had an actual master-slave relationship at one point, and we were together for many, many years. Absolutely love him. Very happy to hear that he has stepped up his career recently and is madly in love with someone in his life. So very, very happy for him. There was a moment in our relationship that was not easy. He made the mistake of finding a hard limit which hadn't existed before. Something that was beyond hurt as far as play went. It actually hit to the point of harm. And I did not call a safe word. I did not give a signal. And I should have, which was my honest mistake. But the after effects of it were brutal. There was a point in the days that followed, the days and weeks actually that followed, where I did not want him to touch me. I even shut down emotionally to the point where he could touch me, where he could do things to me, but I was not mentally present for them. I completely closed him out. And times when I would let him touch me as my own way of punishing him because it would mean less than nothing to me when it had before meant everything. And he could feel that distance, that gap between us. He apologized. He made amends. He did everything to earn back my trust and to heal that gap between us. And it came to a point where I had to forgive him and I had to forgive myself so that we could get not only back to where we were, but further beyond that point and regain the happiness that we had shared, the love and trust and respect that we shared. And from that point, we were able to continue our relationship for another 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So these things happen. It doesn't matter how long you've been around or how long you've been with someone. You can still experience them. And as I said, they're brutal, but if you put in the work, if you're willing to forgive and to learn and trust and grow, you can do a lot with the relationship. So just keep that in mind as you make honest mistakes in your life, because you will.
Yeah. That's very, very true. Now, we've talked about, and thank you for sharing that. It doesn't sound like it was an easy thing to bring to the forefront of your mind. But you and I have both told personal accounts of mistakes that were honest mistakes. But in getting into what to do if it was not a mistake, if it was an intentional, intended violation of someone's consent and boundaries, the first thing that we have to do is first stop making excuses and start owning what we've done. Denying that we've abused someone or mistreated another person purposefully will only make things worse. If you can just claim what you have done and you sincerely have issues within yourself about doing it and you're genuine about it, others are going to see that and it's going to have a very solid effect on you. I've witnessed this happen. I've seen this take place, unfortunately, more times than I would like to admit because of my care and love for this community. The next step after owning it, do not think that you're going to live your life without consequences for your misdeeds. So part of accepting what you have done is understanding that you are going to suffer some consequences and accepting that you deserve those consequences. Do not allow yourself this choice again, and do not expect others to treat you with the courtesy or respect that you have refused to show someone else. And I sound very harsh and bitter about this because, well, yeah, I am. It's been a deplorable act, and it's something that I can say I have never done. And like I said, I do know people that have done this, and I have a really, really good friend who is no longer a part of any community. In fact, he's not even a part of his marriage, which he and his wife were poly. They were both part of the lifestyle and very heavy players. He intentionally abused someone, harmed them very viciously, and at first didn't admit it, denied it. And then finally, only when he was backed into a corner, admitted to it. But that broke open the gates. And though I don't respect him at all for what he did, or for the fact that it took so much to get him to admit to what he did, that he only did it when he was finally backed into a corner with no other choice. But once he claimed his actions, he was finally able to feel honest remorse for it and the shame that he should have felt for it. And he has suffered very, very just punishment for what he had done. And he's been banished. And it was, well, I say he's been banished. He banished himself, because he no longer has trust within himself. The person that he abused has had several conversations with him since. This has been years ago, and have come to a certain level of friendship. Well, acquaintanceship, I guess, would be more the terms. It doesn't upset her anymore to see him or to think about him. But I'm talking 20 years ago that this took place. And he is, as far as I can recall, the only person that I know of that has mended any type of relationship with the person that he has intentionally abused. And the thing that makes me able to accept it, even though it's none of my business, is that he very strongly and honestly believes that he doesn't deserve the forgiveness for it. And it has actually haunted him and caused him more issues now than it did her 20 years ago originally. And it haunted her for probably 5 years or so before she was able to really dip a toe back in the water. I do consider him a friend. The action has been opened and things have gone the way that they should have. And he really has suffered for his deeds. And like I said, he understands that, or to him, he has not suffered enough for it. He finally feels true remorse for his actions. But in general, that's something that, I don't deal with people like that after that takes place. They're just dead to me. Do you have anything to add on that list there, or anything?
Not on that list there. I am going to kind of almost seemingly jump topics, but also stay on the topic of other worthwhile notes on consent within our lifestyle.
Okay.
We're going to talk physical boundaries, i.e. condoms. We usually like to keep this pretty PG-13. I'm trying not to cross that line until next season.
Well,
condoms,
you just let the cat out of the bag on that one.
I did. Spoiler, there's going to be a season 2, and I'm pushing Master Kuldrin to let me go at least rated R.
Well, let me...
Cat's out of the bag.
Since you brought that up, let me go ahead and address that really quick.
Okay.
Krypters, listeners, we are going to end season 1, and I've got a lot of questions about this. Well, you say seasons, but put out a lot of episodes. Season 1 is going to end with episode number 50. We will take a short break, and then we will come back with season 2, where the podcast will be turned to an explicit rating, because I have to with the things that we're going to talk about. We are still going to maintain our integrity with language and being as clean as we can be, but there are some topics in BDSM 201 that need to be addressed, and it's impossible to address them in a completely rated everyone way. So you will see that change, but we will get into edge play, cuckolding, a lot of topics that just need that explicit rating. So bear with us. We're not going to be making some massive changes that are going to make you tune out, but we are going to get into some of the more risque topics. And this has actually been my intent since I started it because I knew that it would reach this point. But as Funsize said, she has been kind of pushing me a little bit to go ahead and jump into that because originally I was thinking more toward the third season. But her being who she is has brought up some very valid points, and I am going to take her counsel, or I have taken her counsel into consideration, and I have agreed with her that we need to go ahead and do this as soon as we hit or finish with the first 50 episodes. So that being said, Funsize, thanks for that wonderful counsel as always. And let's jump right back into this. You were talking about condoms.
I was talking about condoms. Condoms are an important boundary for many that reduce both the risk of pregnancies and that of STIs and STDs. And for those of you who don't know, yes, there is a big difference between STIs and STDs. If you don't know, definitely look that up and check it out because
sexually transmitted
you will
infections.
probably need to.
If I remember correctly, we're talking about sexually transmitted infections versus sexually transmitted diseases. So something that can be cured versus something that
can be treated at best.
Yes. Wasn't there a law passed or removed or something involving condoms?
There was a law. It's a law about the removal of condoms before or during a sexual act without your partner's knowledge. It's an act called stealthing, and it was written into law officially back in California as of May 2017, which added that once stealthing has happened, the act is no longer considered consensual. While this doesn't seem like a huge thing as far as BDSM goes, it is a huge thing as far as consent goes. And as we engage in many sexual acts and things that we have to consent to or against, it's important to know. And I feel like this is a law that's going to catch on in all states and hopefully all countries throughout the world within my lifetime. It's a betrayal that I would not tolerate, and a betrayal and a consent violation that I hope others will not be tolerant of as well.
Yeah, I know a couple of people who got herpes from the same person because of stealthing.
Ugh, I would be so angry.
Yeah. Angry. Yes, that's what I was going to say. Anger, being angry just doesn't define how they feel, and will continue to feel, or how I feel, because these are friends of mine that this happened to. And, so that's just a sorry piece of garbage that would do something like that. And if you're listening and that's something that you would do, then, if you're not really picking up on what we're putting down here, go ahead and find yourself another podcast to listen to. I'm not even kidding. What other notes?
The next note I've got is the NCSF Ally Project and Consent Counts. The NCSF is the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom, which has been coordinating the Consent Counts project in a BDSM community worldwide effort in education and activism in order to offer legal protection against consent violations. This is something we're going to dive into next week when we do BDSM and the law finally. I'm actually very excited, in case you can tell. The American Law Institute or Ally, has been working in conjunction with this project to change the moral penal code to decriminalize consensual BDSM. So what this means for all of us is that for most states in the US and several other countries, whether we consent to the activities we're engaging in or not, they're still considered legally reprehensible.
Yes.
90% of impact play is still considered assault, for example.
In my state, any type of impact play is considered assault legally. And that's just, it's so ridiculous to me. But I can understand why the law exists, but that doesn't mean that I agree with it.
Yes.
Obviously, I don't. So, with that said, are there any other important notes that you would like to throw out?
No, I think we've actually wrapped up part 2 really well with boundaries.
Okay.
Well, of course, if people have any questions or comments, they can shoot them our way.
Before we give an official wrap up, I do have kind of a recap that I would like to do on this because it is such an important topic. So not to dive back into any specific points, but real quick, boundaries, we have defined the purpose and types. We've talked about the breakdown of these types. We've talked about why it's important to know what your boundaries are and have appropriate ones. Become aware of your needs, get support, communicate effectively, and be realistic. We've talked about where boundaries start, that they're natural, that people with healthy boundaries have limits and recognize what they are, know what they will or will not do, know what they will or will not allow others to do to them. We've talked about teaching others how to treat you, which is also training them how to treat you. We've talked about what to do when boundaries aren't respected, both unintentionally and intentionally. If you find this is an issue, this would probably be an important one to go back and listen to it. And that's one of the greatest things that people say to me is, oh my God, I listened to this particular episode and there was so much good information in there that I had to go back and re-listen and take notes on it. And I love getting those because I know that that's going to open up to an amazing conversation that is probably going to end up leading to a show topic that we haven't thought about doing. So if you have any ideas on things for us to do, feel free to go to the website. You can hit the speak pipe button if you want to record it straight to me. It comes through in an email. You can call in, like I say at the beginning of the show, 865-268-4005 and leave me a voicemail or send me a text message that way. You can email me. My email is sir@kuldrinscrypt.com, or if you want to get in touch with Funsize, which I highly recommend. She is a great conversationalist. Her email is
funsize@kuldrinscrypt.com.
All right, so as Funsize said, next time on the Krypt, we're going to dive into BDSM and the law. In the meantime, go to kuldrinscrypt.com for show notes, how to subscribe information, and the link to our FetLife group so you can take part in the conversation over there and be eligible for giveaways, like our massive Christmas giveaway that we just did. While you're there, click on the Support Us tab to become a Patreon supporter. And speaking of, as the final note, I would like to thank our executive producer, Jeremiah, our senior producer, Matt, our producer, Missy Lynn, and our junior producers, K2SO, Funsize's very own husband, Irish Mountain Dragon, and The Accidental Trucker. If you would like to become one of our show producers, as I said, go to kuldrinscrypt.com/support me to get that information. And with that, there are certain levels that get you fun little things like stickers, t-shirts, hoodies, things like that. Also, BDSMcontracts.org. Thank you very much for your donation of your beautiful 25-page soft and hardbound MS and DS contracts. To check them out, go to BDSMcontracts.org. Use the coupon code Kuldrin20. You can receive a 20% discount on all purchases. Finally, Whipping Stripes. You are absolutely amazing. Whippingstripes.com. You are the maker of all of my leather and paracord floggers, whips, any type of impact. And that is going to wrap it up. As was said, if you need to contact me, sir@kuldrinscrypt.com or Funsize@kuldrinscrypt.com. This has been Master Kuldrin and Funsize for kuldrinscrypt.com. Unearth the truth.